All right, everybody, welcome to this week's Cornwall Umpires Association Zoom Lunch Clinic. We're talking about when to get help. The more technical term, I guess, would be a crew consultation. This is when either we as the calling umpire can go to our partner or partners, or in certain situations, our partners can come to us, whether solicited or unsolicited, with additional information. As always, if you do have questions, please do feel free to ask. Those either raise your hand, put them in the chat. Both Connor and Russ will monitor the chat. And we want to ask questions. As a reminder, the golden rule here is the only dumb question is the one that you don't ask. If you got questions or you got topics that you'd like us to talk about in future clinics, feel free to shoot Connor or I an email, drop something in the chat. We'd love to talk about it. If there's a topic that you would like to take and do a weekly presentation on, we'd be more than happy to have you do a presentation on something that you're interested in. As Connor alluded to last week, these clinics help him and I, stay in the rule book. We have to go through and read the rule book. This specific clinic, I ended up in what we like to refer to as the modern version of the P-Buck manual. And so, as well as the rule book. So lots of topic areas we can cover, but we want to know what everyone wants us to talk about. So why do we need to get help or have a crew consultation? I think it's generally accepted there's three reasons why an umpire gets a call. Maybe wrong, they're out of position, proper use of eyes, or improper timing. But along that as well, an umpire could have insufficient information, or another umpire on the field has a better look, better version of what happened, and may be able to provide additional information. A couple ways that we can communicate that a crew conference is necessary. I've worked with some guys that they'll just grab like their shirt collar like this if they want to get together. Some of them will grab and adjust their belt, or go hands in pocket, which I really am not a fan of. Some people that I've worked with, they've said, if I'm not in the spot that you would expect me to be in, means I have additional information. So an example of this would be
and towards you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely walking towards you. If you're not in the spot you expect them to be in, make sure they're actually bringing you information and not just dealing with something else or walking away saying, yep, I don't have anything, I'm out. I'm going back to where I need to go.
Can I give you a counter argument with that, Jake?
Go for it.
Do not signal. This is directly from Mike Conlon. It is endorsed by Scott Taylor and Umlin. The reason is, if you're signaling in any way, shape, or form, you are notifying the opposing coach that you have information, and you will get them more motivated. And if it doesn't go their way, they're going to say that they're getting screwed. Signaling is a mistake. If you have information, Russ will tell you what to do with it, but the signal days are done. It's not going to help. At a high school level, maybe if you're working with somebody that doesn't realize that things have happened outside of their ability to perceive, but at the college level and high level amateurs, don't do it. It's not a good idea.
Good stuff to add, Dan. Thanks for that. I guess the position on the field, I've worked with some guys where if I'm working the base or something like that and they got information on a pulled foot or a swipe tag, they'll just go up the third base line. Something to pregame how you're going to do it, but as Dan said, the days of signaling are pretty much over. There are really 6 situations by rule where we can have a crew consultation. The first one would be deciding whether a fly ball that left the playing field was fair or foul. This is relatively straightforward. If we're in a situation with no runners on and the fly ball is in U1's fly ball coverage area, we likely have a situation where both the fence and the foul line are threatened. So we should definitely be looking at having U1 go out on that play. The second situation we can have a crew consultation would be deciding whether a batted ball left the playing field as a home run or a ground rule double. Again, no runners on. U1 should probably look at going out on this. This is definitely one of those trouble balls. Cases where a foul tip is dropped by the catcher, causing it to become a foul ball. I know last year, Connor, I think didn't last year we talk about the open hand, closed hand mechanic from the base umpire. So if you recall from one of the clinics we did last year on crew communication, we talked about using a closed fist to as a signal to show that the third strike was caught cleanly, or that if we have an open hand that the base umpire has, that the ball was caught after it hit the ground or it was not caught clean. So we can get together in that situation. A case where an umpire clearly errs in judgment since the ball was dropped, or it might have been juggled after a tag or force. We can get together on those. Connor, is that where you would put the pulled foot swipe tag type conference or consultation?
It only necessarily fits there, but I definitely think it's something that we can get together on. Something we cover in pregame. You know, I think it depends on how you're going to officiate or how you're going to umpire that. I think it's something we can get together on. I think that as the plate umpire and the base umpire, we need to have a conversation about who's taking what, especially as we get near the bag. Every crew is going to do a little differently. Everybody's going to have a different opinion on it. But it's definitely something where on those plays at first base, we can help with. But I'm going to, if it occurs around the base, I'm going to let the base umpire come to me for help if they want help. Whereas if it occurs further up the line, like the 45 sometimes uses a delineating factor and when somebody has the tag. But yeah, I definitely think it's something we need to be able to get together on. We need to have the cognizant awareness to get together on those plays if we think there's a piece of information we are missing. If we're 100% correct, I'm just, Coach, I had a great look at that play. He got him on the head. He got him on the left shoulder. He got him in the middle of the back. I don't need help on this one. Dan, Russ, were you going to add something? Cool.
Oh, I'm totally bored. Yeah.
The fifth situation, I guess, is one that most of us on this call probably will not ever run into, but it's definitely something we need to be aware of, which would be a case where we have a potential spectator interference. On a play like this, we would make sure to get together to, one, make sure that we do have spectator interference, and then two, we got to make sure that we can place runners properly. So that's why we would want to have a crew consultation on that. And then the last one that we can get together on Yep.
Before we get to that,
Yep.
Brad had a question. So once it's acknowledged that your partner has a different call, is time called. Brad, what are you referring to? Is this is like the calling official has something and then the non-calling umpire has information to bring you? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So how this is typically going to work, and we're going to cover the mechanics of how this will work here once we get through all like the nuts and bolts of when we can get together and get information. So I'm going to pause on that. And if I don't answer it here in about the next 20 minutes, pop your mic on and let me know.
We will. It'll be obvious.
So the last situation where we can get together and have a crew consultation would be a balk where the umpire clearly did not realize the pitcher's foot was off the rubber. This one's pretty straightforward, I think, as far as why we can have a crew consultation. For there's some umpires on here that are working at the college level. Obviously, there's differences for what we can and cannot get together on from this. This is through official baseball rules, so amateur ball, Legion ball, when we can get together. But let's also talk about some situations where we can't get together and have a crew consultation.
Before we start on this slide, Jake.
Yep.
Before we start on this slide, the other situation that's not on here that I realized we didn't put on here is anytime we think we may have misapplied a rule. We can always get together over the misapplication of rule to ensure that we're enforcing it correctly, because that's something that can get us into a lot of trouble if we misapply a rule. And that's something where, as a crew, we don't need a coach to come out and say, hey, I think this should be a 2-base award from time of pitch, not time of throw. We can be like, we can award everything, call time, and then say, okay, we're going to get together and make sure we get this right. If you ever have an inkling of a feeling that you as an umpire are about to allow a misapplication of a rule to be applied, call time, get together with your crew, talk it over. It's much easier to correct it or come in, have a quick conversation and realize, nope, we did get it right. We're going to proceed as is, than it is to let something get blown out of proportion that could have been fixed with a simple question in the moment. All right, go ahead, Jake.
I think getting together in a situation like that, if we do have a rule misapplication, it's a great way to build a credibility with coaches. It shows that you're on point, you know what's going on, and you're involved in the game, and making sure that we're getting stuff correct. So moving on, let's talk about when we can't have a crew consultation. And the big situation where we can't have crew consultations would be decisions of umpire judgment. This would be ball strikes, with one exception, which I will get to here momentarily. Safe and out, and then force plays. And we'll talk about kind of getting together on force play, tag play type situations, because there's some minute areas where we actually can get together on them, but it's easier to just say generally we can't get together on them. The one exception for balls and strikes would obviously be a half swing where the batter has checked their swing, and we have a proper appeal. Under high school rules, there is no requirement to ask. I don't believe under OBR you have to ask, but if you're working at the collegiate level, you do have to ask if there is an appeal made.
OBR, you do.
Yeah,
OBR does. Okay.
OBR.
So OBR in college
does. And NFHS, just do it.
Yeah.
It puts out a lot of fires, a lot easier. Everybody's already expecting you to ask. Just ask. That's the easiest thing I can say is you just ask anyways. You're not required to, but you're going to get a lot more flack by not asking than you do by just taking 3 seconds to go. Russ, did he go? And Russ says, Connor, you're always right. Yes, he did.
Yeah. That is not the hill you want to die on in a high school game. Of all the hills you want to die on, that's just not the one.
So Connor, let's talk about, when we were talking about prepping for this, questions of fact, I guess, is kind of how our conversation went. And so if there was a tag that was applied, if the foot was on the bag, those would be situations where we can solicit information from our partners. Correct?
Yeah, it's not a judgment of did he beat the ball to the base. It's was his foot on the bag. And we'll cover this here in a couple of seconds when we get into it and we talk about covering a pulled foot and how that conversation goes. But we have information. If we're calling let's say pulled foot, right? We know the throw beat them. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a pulled foot call. We would just have a safe. He wasn't safe because he was off the bag. He was safe because the throw beat him. So then if we go, okay, well, he's safe. He's safe because he's off the bag. and we signal that, we wipe him away. And then we go get help, and Jake says, Connor, his foot was on the bag. Well, the throw had to have beat him, otherwise I wouldn't be doing this, right? I would just go safe because then he beat the throw. So now it's coming down to information of, did he beat it? Not did he beat it or not? Was his foot on the bag when he caught the ball? That's all that matters at that point. And if Jake gives me that information, I can take that information and change my call, because Jake tells me his foot was on the bag. I erred in judgment of his foot being on the bag. And the only reason I would have had him safe is because he was off the bag.
I think of it as is it a question of fact? Like, most of you know, I'm a law student, so we deal in questions of fact or questions of law. I look at it, is it a question of judgment or is it a question of fact? If it's a question of fact, we can get together on it. But if it's a question of judgment, we're not going to have a consultation on that. So let's talk about what the rulebook says with this. So 802 is the main rule that we have to engage in a crew consultation. Now, I'm not gonna read off the slide, but I have bolded certain parts of various elements of this rule that are, I guess, what we think are important. And the one to really highlight here is just that you have to go to the calling umpire. And we're going to talk about the procedure here, I believe, in 2 slides. And so do remember that it is important that we do go to the calling umpire. And we'll talk about if it's a situation where Connor and I are working and coach wants to come out and ask Connor to get help on a pulled foot on the back end of a double play, and the coach comes to me as the plate umpire. How would we handle that situation? So we're going to talk about that here in just a moment. But the big rule, or at least in my opinion, is 802C. So I've kind of highlighted by underlining what happens if we decide to change a call. So we can take whatever steps we deem necessary to eliminate the call that was in error. And that a scenario with that would be hypothetically, and this is starting to get into the college book, but if we had a call of catch that was a no catch, and say it was a fly ball with 1 out, and it was a catch. It was called a catch, but it was overturned later on. But it was deep enough where we reasonably think that any runner on base would tag in advance. We could potentially award whatever bases to negate that. I put the last sentence here in bold. Connor and I, over the last 24 hours in preparation for this, we've started talking with SUA leadership to kind of clarify what the procedure is for umpires in handling these types of situations where we have, we already know that if they come back out to argue, there's the coach is subject to ejection, but there's other things that we could put in place potentially to try to prevent ejections or things of that nature. So we're working on trying to implement some of that stuff, but do know that if they do come back onto the field to argue, whoever's arguing is subject to ejection. So we'll talk about how to handle managers, coaches with these types of appeals. First, is there a situation that we can just get together right away and come unsolicited? If yes, let's absolutely get together right away. Russ has a video that he'll share here in a few minutes where the on-field crew they get together, or I believe you guys got together right away, but the coach might have come on. I don't remember the video as well as you have. Important though, the manager has to go to the calling umpire. So if Connor and I are working, and say I'm the base umpire. I got the back end of the 6-4-3. It was close whether or not the first baseman pulled his foot. The manager has to come to me first to ask for help. Based on that, then I can determine whether or not I feel that I need help. We should not get into a situation where we get together just to appease a coach or a manager if we are 100%. There was a game that I had last year with, I believe Jason's on the call. Jason and I had a game last year where we had a ball go out of play in the outfield. And there was a question of whether or not the right fielder had intentionally put the ball out of play or if he had misplayed the ball and it went into the bullpen, which is out of play. Well, I was on the bases and I saw it. And in my judgment right away, I knew with certainty that there was no intent. It was clearly misplayed by the right fielder, and that caused it to go out of play. So we awarded bases accordingly, as opposed to whether it had been played intentionally. Manager came out. I said, no, I'm 100% sure on this. I watched the play the whole way through. I know that I'm 100% confident on this. You know, Jason and I, we talked about the game. He's like, yeah, absolutely. The right fielder totally misplayed that ball. So if you're 100% sure, you don't have to get together. So then we want to figure out if a crew consultation is appropriate. If it's not appropriate, i.e. it is, they're asking to consult over judgment, you just say, you know, by rule, we can't conference over judgment. Please return to your position. We need to resume the game. If yes, what I like to do is I'll instruct the manager or coach to return to the dugout or their position, and just tell them that, hey, we're not coming back onto the field to discuss this after the fact. And if they come back out to argue the call, they may be subject to ejection. We're working on getting this done at the lower levels. I think it's a great way to, with pace of play, especially if we're not overturning a call. So it's something that we're working on. I guess I'm going to let kind of Russ and Dan go through some of the begin consultation stuff with their video. But the way that I like to handle my crew consultations is I'm going to tell Connor, so we'll use the double play example. Hey, Connor, I have first baseman's foot on the bag at the time he firmly possessed the ball, and I have an out. Do you have the first baseman's foot on the base? And it's a simple yes or no. Yes, his foot was on the base. No, his foot was off the base. Okay, so if Connor says, go ahead.
So number one to remember with this, kill the coach with kindness. How you phrase everything about this is going to make your life so much easier. And it goes to just anything you do in life in general. Just be very, very polite in explaining everything to him. Okay, I'm going to go ask for help, coach. Before I do that, though, I need you to return to your dugout. If we don't change the call and you come back out, you're going to be ejected. And give them that decision and make sure that they do return all the way to their dugout prior to initiating that conversation. Or if they're at the third base coach, return to third base, your third base coach's box. But be very kind and very succinct with your information. The more verbose we get, the more words we use, the more trouble we get ourselves into. So keep it very short and sweet. Jake, I would change like how I'm going to do this. I'm going to say, Jake, I've got the first baseman's foot on the bag when he got the ball. Do you have anything different, or do you have any other information? As opposed to asking yes or no question. But that's just me personally, because you're either going to say no, Connor's foot was off the bag, or yes, he was on, and we're going to go, okay, I'm going to point to him, make my signal, or we're going to break. I'm going to point, make my signal, and then we'll deal with whatever happens next.
Make a plan. Make a plan before you break about what you're going to do.
Say it out loud. Exactly. Work it through in case you got something that could be different, could be better.
And if we're changing a call, I'm going to say, okay, Jake, you have his foot off the bag. Perfect. This is what we're going to do. We're going to break. I'm going to point to the runner. I'm going to signal safe. And then I am going to go over to intercept the visiting team coach who had the call changed against them with an explanation ready. And this is what I'm going to tell them. Jake had information that the first baseman's foot was off the bag when he caught the ball. The runner then beat him back to the base. And that's going to be it. Because they're going to want an explanation every time. And if we're not prepared for that, we're going to get caught off guard and we're going to A, look really bad, or B, cause the situation to be worse by not being prepared for that situation to come up and have that information ready for him, rehearsed so you know exactly what you're going to say.
Absolutely.
Brad, did that answer your question?
Done.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, it did get answered in there.
Yeah, so we're only going to call, like, once I have a call and the coach comes out, we're going to have time called, correct? So if we go get help, time's already been called, and then we're going to go get information. That my partner should never come to me and say, Connor, no, he was off the bag. We should always have, I should always, as a calling umpire, should always initiate that conversation. And that time should already be called by that point. But yeah, we would call time before getting together.
Russ, you got that video ready to go?
I do.
It's all you, buddy.
All righty. Do I share content? Okay. All righty. Come on. Why won't this work? All righty. Y'all can see this?
Yeah, we got you.
All right, cool. Okay, for those of you that are in the CBUA, you have seen this video, but you have not seen this in its raw. Hello? All right. You haven't seen this in its raw form. So we've got, what you can't see is a couple things that are off camera. We've got runners on first and third. I'll turn on a port, and I don't even remember how much, what they were. Although I know it's not 2 outs because we do go back and play.
No,
It was. Okay, thanks. Dan is our crew chief, and he is U1. And I will echo Tim Cordell's comments. Crazy shit happens when you wear blue. I highly suggest you don't. But that's your choice. The guy, our friend in blue, is a very accomplished guy. Got picked up in the Big East this year. This is in no way like off-putting toward any umpire or anything like that. So this is just a simple bunt play. I'll roll the video and we will talk about kind of what we did here. There's no audio for this, and I'm not a play-by-play guy, so we're just gonna watch. Simple bunt happens after the baseball hits. What makes that simple bunt anything but simple?
he's getting chopped up. It's not a simple bunt. It's actually a squeeze play, but that's fine. Your runner from third is going to break.
Yep.
The call here in this,
So-
this is a specific NCAA rule that we have here. So under OBR and high school, the rule is different. But what we're going to talk about is the crew getting together.
Yeah. And I was writing down here 6 reasons not correct application of a rules, another to get together. And I don't think what this ends up to be is this is just a misapplication of a rule.
Hang on, Russ, you're breaking
You
up
can
there.
see
So
the play
let me
on-
grab the mic for a second. What we have here is you can see number 19 from
Yeah.
St. Thomas had broken with the pitch. The bunt gets down. It's directly up the first baseline. what triggered me at first base, you can't see me on camera yet, is the batter, who's right-handed, keeps the bat at his waist with both hands on it, takes 3 steps, and then drops the bat where it ends up. I'm not saying he intentionally put that bat in the flight of the baseball, but he sure took a chance. So, and Connor and Jake are dead right. The rule is different for pro and for high school. In college, we have a specific rule, 7-11, N as in Nancy. When you put a whole bat into fair territory, such that a baseball makes contact with the bat as a defender's making a play on it, and that ball leaves the field of play, becomes foul, it is not foul. It is interference. So what Kevin's got here, and Russ pointed out where he's at. He's in the Big East. He's got Big Ten games. He's one of the best umpires in the region, and he has pro experience. So there you see the baseball contact the bat, and it's going to kick 7-8 feet into foul territory, just as our catcher's attempting to make a play on it. Kevin sees this. He's in the perfect position. He's got a runner advancing from third. That's very important. You can't chase up the first baseline. You got obligations at the plate first. So he's going to let that runner plate, and then he's going to indicate that this ball is dead. He's going to get his hands up. You see where he's picked up. He's so good at seeing everything around him. Picks up that runner, lets him score. He's going to walk up the the first baseline, get his hands up, and as he continues, he's going to have kind of an unusual underhand motion, but he's indicating that that ball is foul. He's pointing the bat, and then he kind of, you don't see the full gesture, but he actually sort of quietly points it foul, and then he takes the baseball and exchanges it with the pitcher. For purposes of today, what I need you to understand is how important it is that Russ missed no time here. I'm coming in hot. I got both hands up, and I'm calling my guys, but it helps that Russell, who's the umpire that the eyes go to for both coaches, both dugouts, Russell's coming in going, no, whatever we got. And he actually said this, it ain't foul. It's very important because Russ's comment, while not rules related or part of our script, it gets me ready to talk about what we have to do here. I know this is a massive play. It's second inning, and we've got a team that is not expected to be terribly competitive in the conference. It's their first year at Division I. They're tied in this game. They've already won 1 of the 3 games. This matters. They get this run across. They want that run very badly. That matters. It means that it's sort of a high attention, and these coaches are going to be a little amped up. We did hear the coach from North Dakota State in the third base dugout come out and say that's, he really didn't know what he was yelling, but he didn't like it. And he's hollering. And at some point, he's even going to say, I get him out there. It doesn't hurt that he's right, but it's not what gets us together. It's not what controls. You see Russ look back. He didn't have to control Tyler Oakes, who's the coach at NDSU. He made a note. He's staying by the dugout. So I don't have to go over there and say, stay there, wait until we do this. But here's our conversation. And what we did, just like we told you guys earlier, you let the calling umpire have the floor first. What we did here is Russ, to speed things along, he says, Kevin, what do you have? And confirms that Kevin's got a foul. Now, this is where I kind of jumped in because I had just looked at this rule maybe 2 days before. And the other thing is I'm kind of the set of eyes I think that matter even a little more than Russ's, because I'm looking right down the line. I see what the batter runner did. It's not like he dropped the bat in the box and it bounced and rolled to that position. He actually took 3 steps, was looking at the baseball, and I saw him deliver the bat to the ground. I'm not saying it's an intentional act. What I'm saying is it's weird. And because he did that, I think he creates the circumstance where he has to own the fact that F2 catcher cannot make a play on that ball. And for me, that satisfies 7-11, N as in Nancy, not M as in Mary. And we now have a change on this call. We have a misapplied rule. And what Russ and I decided is very important. Pause it right there, Russ. Thanks. Russ and I decided that we would leave Kevin, the calling umpire, on the field. There are some coordinators who want us to do that. Have 2 guys that are not the calling umpires go and talk to the affected coach. In this case, it'll be the home coach, Chris O'Lean, because that keeps Kevin from having to answer well, how did you fuck it up? How did you screw this? Excuse my French. Why didn't you get it right away? That was kind of our intention. Mike Conlon has a different take. He wants the calling umpire to be in that conversation, whether it's a question of credibility, whether it's just accountability, whatever. Conlon wants, in this instance, what we should have done is put Russ back there somewhere near the mound, keeping an eye on the players, and you got conversation going on at second base. You got to have your eyes behind you and see that could turn into an argument. It didn't. These guys are fine, but you got to be aware of it. We should have left Russ as the eyes on the field, and Kevin and I should have gone over. The other thing is that foot, I've got the right foot across the foul line. I'm wrong here. What we need to do this year is stay at the 45 and bring the coach directly to us. That's an affirmation of the COVID rule. At this point, we weren't really thinking too much about COVID. And what I want to do is make sure that we got Chris under control, got him his explanation. And if he's going to lose his mind, it's going to be pretty visible, and it's going to happen fairly quickly. Russ, why don't you take it?
Yeah, we've got, hopefully the audio is a little bit better here now. We've also got history. The three of us have history with this home coach, way more so than we do with the visiting coach. Or
any other coach.
Yeah, right. And Chris has, it can't be overstated that this is the only program, we understand it, this is the only program in the history of NCAA athletics that's gone from the Division III to the Division I world with no stops in between. So that move up is, it should just be noted. It's an important move. And these guys handled the entire year with such class and dignity that that can't be overstated as well. So we needed to go and talk with Chris and just let him know what we had, and what we were going to do and what the outcome was going to be. And so Dan and I both went over and talked to Chris, and they'll pan over and let us kind of just see this. So Dan is the crew chief. So Dan's speaking here. I'm really just listening, and now we're gonna
don't pull the other one, Russ. Come on, nobody believes that.
Yeah, I know. No one believes the attorney was talking. I get it.
Or that you were listening. No.
Right. Well, that's fair too. What no one will believe is Chris. Chris said something that is extraordinarily abnormal. But again, it showed sort of his dignity in his class and how he has dealt with that, the whole situation all year. He said, guys, I got to be honest with you. I don't know this rule. I trust you. And then he turned and walked away. It was over. And so what we did then is, again, let's go back to the when the three of us were talking. We had a plan for every step of this. Russ and Dan are going to go talk to Chris. When we are done, our plate umpire is going to signal, and you'll see that here in just a second. And then we're all going to go back to work. But if in the meantime, if there's anything that we have to deal with, then we'll deal with it. Of course, the way Chris handled things with his class, there was nothing to handle. We were just ready to go. So it worked out very, very well.
Russ, hang on there. One thing, Connor had an interesting comment. He said, on a pulled foot, I'm going to back up. I'm going to signal the changed call and then go talk to the coach. At the college level, I don't signal until we get that conversation done. But Connor, it's worth thinking about. Some situations, I think they know what we're doing. It's pretty obvious. Umpire was screened, and so we flipped the call, and that would make sense at that pulled foot. On this one, because you've got multiple runners affected, you're going to have an out now. You're going to change the batting order. I think it made sense, and I like what Russ is doing. Russ has eyes and body language on the coach that's at third base. I'm paying attention just in case one of the assistants from St. Thomas, who have in past been a little bit mercurial and can get active, I'm making sure that they're fine. I'm back over at first base because we're going to end up with runners at first and third, and now we got one out. And that batter's walking off. And I think the batter knew he had a sense. He didn't object. He didn't get crazy. But I think in this instance, to signal the change call after we've had the conversation with the coach who's affected was particularly wise. It was a good idea. But at the high school level, for a fairly obvious flip, you may want to go ahead and call it and then go interrupt the coach or intercept him.
Yeah. It's a really weird play. This got sent up all the way through the Division II national coordinator, which it was a little odd, but we have a special relationship with him that we sent it to him, and he thought we got it wrong. And then after some consultation with Randy, they quickly found out that no, we actually got this right. But it also went to our coordinator, who immediately knew we had it right, and communicated that to everybody it needed to be communicated to, that the crew had this right and there's really nothing else to kind of talk about. So it's the misapplication of the rule thing here is, I think, the important reason to get together, if you will, as well as how do you do things while you're there. The body language of every one of us was real positive. Nobody looked dejected. No one looked angry. Nobody looked hurried, like they're like, hurry up, we got to get going, that kind of thing. It was still a chilly day, but it wasn't too bad. But we still, you still have to have positive body language. Again, treat people well, to Connor's point there, and just lead through the entire thing. Everyone's looking at you. You got to be the one who's leading everybody else. So, anybody else have anything?
It's not going to be an issue, Russ, for most guys when they're working a 2-man. But if you ever are working in a larger crew, make sure everybody's in before you start talking. You need the input of everybody. It doesn't matter if it's a fair foul in left field. You might have something. You absolutely need all umpires on it as you go. And what's really important is don't have a conversation with a coach and start thinking about changing until you talk to your partner. The conversation is what's important. It shows them that we're putting all the information that we can in one place, and we're going to make the best decision that we can. And the other thing is, come to that conversation as humble as possible. Even though I was confident of what I was about to do, I got 2 of my favorite umpires, two of the guys I look up to as much as any. If they'd had something really different, I'm going to listen to it, and I'm going to make the best argument that I can. But frankly, it's a democracy. If Russ and in this case Kevin Young, if they both said, "No, Dan, you're wrong, we're going to keep this foul," that's how we're leaving. Okay, and then I'd look like a star when I was right later. But here's the other thing that I, it does. It's tough, but it deserves saying. Kevin's incredibly proud. He's incredibly talented. And this ate at him for quite a while. When we got back to the locker room, he immediately jumped in the book to make sure I wasn't wrong. And he did what he could to sort of fight his way through it. And now he'll never get it wrong. That's what these things do. Hopefully that video for you guys, if you're working a college game and that happens, remember this, pull it back up. That's what I do with these stupid tests. I take them so many times. I got the questions memorized. If I got a batter that gets hit in his equipment, I'm going to know what to do with that. I'm even going to know exactly what rule and be able to cite to it. So try to put this stuff front and forward in your memory so that it resonates. Because if you can bring it out when you're talking to the coach, the conversation level goes way down. Your credibility goes way up, and it matters. It resonates later.
And our credibility goes farther with the third base coach, Tyler Oakes, again from North Dakota. He knows that we took the time and got it right. That his eyes are glued on us. One other thing I want to talk about that conversation is when you get together, it's a great practice to begin. Look over your buddy's shoulders. This is not a position where you need eye contact with your other umpire. Look over his shoulders and be observing what's going on the field. You don't want to miss. You don't want to miss something. You don't want to miss a fight. You don't want to miss anything that is going to cause trouble later on. So be watching over your shoulder. So.
All right. So I'm gonna jump in here. If anybody has any final questions, feel free to stick them in the chat. To Dan's point about test questions, Dan, as I told you yesterday, I think law school's made me really good at taking these types of questions. Do rules tests as frequently as you can. I realize that we're trying to get the SDUA test retooled a little bit, but do go back in and take those test questions, go look them up. Keep your nose in the rule book. Rule knowledge is something that sports officials can very much control, especially in an area where we don't have a lot of control. So do go back in and take rules tests as frequently as you can. Referee Magazine's got some great resources. Well, and the resources, this is kind of a really good segue. as far as resources are concerned, because last year, about this time, a gentleman by the name of Andrew Fulton reached out to me about something called UMP app. We talked about it briefly last week in some of the resources page, but Sean Johnston, who is the operator president of PSOA, Division I college baseball umpire, he's the Great Plains Athletic Conference coordinator. I've worked for Sean. I think this is my 5th season. I've learned a lot from Sean. About 3 weeks ago, Sean released a podcast called Time Out with PSOA. And he actually had his podcast drops every Wednesday. And this week's podcast was an interview with Tim Cordell, who is the CBUA video guru for training. And Tim has also developed something called UMP app. And so I'm going to allow Sean to take the last 5 minutes or so here and talk about his podcast, talk about UMP app and other stuff like that. So Sean, go ahead, take it away.
Appreciate it, Jacob and Connor and Russ, having this meeting and sending me the invite. It was always good to listen to here. Again, the information. Sort of jump on what Jacob said there. As I'll just say baseball umpire, whether you're high school, whether you're college, whether you're little league, whatever rule set you are using, you have to revisit the rules. In our local meeting last week, we said, the 2 things that fear sports officials the most: a coach that knows the rules better than us, and a partner who only read the rule book one time. If you read the rule book one time, I promise you, you don't know the rules. So Tim Cordell came onto our podcast. Again, it dropped this morning, and he's talking about, how to learn the rules, why to learn the rules, why go back to review the rules. And at the end of the day, it's exactly what Russ was talking about in his play. We are prepared and we could handle situations. We could handle communication with coaches. And if you prepare yourself and you show that you're prepared, the coach is going to trust you. I don't know this rule, but looks like you guys do know the rule. And that's what UMP app does allow for umpires, is not only this is the rule, but this is the intent of the rule. This is how to apply the rule. This is what you have to look for to adjudicate the rule. So a little plug there for Timmy Cordell. And then my podcast is called Time Out with PSOA. And the idea behind it is for all sports officiating, not just baseball. I do football, softball, and basketball as well. And then as the season goes, the year goes, we're going to hit wrestling, hit soccer. I'm going to dabble in some hockey. Jacob Sant, be ready for that one. But it's for all sports officials and sharing our story as sports officials. So fans, coaches, players get to know a lot more than we just go out there, put on a uniform and make calls, because we all know that that's the tip of the iceberg, but we cover the 90% underneath water that people don't see. So try to keep it 30 minutes at a time. So good time period to take a 30-minute walk, 30-minute workout, and put it in your earbuds and take a listen. And I'm easily to get contacted. So if you do have questions or ideas or thoughts of what we can put in the podcast, I really want this podcast to turn into the sports officials' voice. So if you have ideas, thoughts, you feel like you want to be part of the podcast or show, come on down, because again, that's exactly what we use it for. Tim Cordell has an UMP app. Tim, come to our podcast, get UMP app out there so other people could do it. Use it, get educated, and coaches, umpires, and fans don't yell at each other. So appreciate you guys having me.
Thanks, Sean.
Appreciate it, Sean. Sean's podcast is on Apple Podcasts. I believe it's on Spotify. I know it's on YouTube. You just search Time Out with PSOA at whatever podcast service you use. You should be able to find it. If you have questions, do feel free to reach out to myself, If you want to get in contact with Sean, reach out to me and I will try to get you in touch with Sean. Great guy who's done a lot for sports officials in and around the Omaha area, and beyond that through the Midwest. Sean, looks like you just posted one of the links to the podcast. And I also put the UMP app link in there. UMP app it's $50. I mean, it's half a game fee for most of us. At some point in time, I'm still pushing SDUA to try to figure out some way to adopt using this, especially because we are so geographically big. Getting proper umpire training is challenging, and the thing that Tim has done, and hopefully Sean's okay with just a little bit of a spoiler, but Tim is a former professional baseball umpire, and he's got good friends that he was going through the minors with that are now working in the major leagues. And we got big league umpires that are watching these videos and providing feedback on them to make sure that any umpire can understand the concepts that are being taught. And they're constantly tweaking the videos, and they cover everything for $50. It's an unbelievable training resource. I cannot recommend it enough. Do we have any last thoughts, questions, comments? All right, with that, I will stop the recording.